The opening of the film takes us directly to the luxurious room of the Wilshire Grand Hotel, located in the heart of Los Angeles, in the year 1937. Here we meet Hannon Fuller, a magnate whose fortune borders on the unimaginable, absorbed in writing a letter addressed to one of his employees. In it, he reveals that he has stumbled upon a discovery so dangerous it could cost him his life. With the letter finished, Fuller descends to the crowded ballroom, his presence as striking as the decor around him, and discreetly hands it to Ashton, the trustworthy bartender. He whispers that a man named Douglas Hall will come looking for this correspondence. Without delay, Fuller leaves the hotel, takes a taxi toward the comfort of his home, while Ashton breaks the seal of the letter and absorbs the words written inside. Simultaneously, the scene shifts to the billionaire, who upon returning to his mansion, heads straight to his bedroom to rest. Just as he reclines beside his wife, an abrupt transition transports him to a futuristic laboratory in Los Angeles in the year 1999. It is revealed that the Los Angeles of 1999 is a place of great technological advancement and innovation. 1937 is nothing more than a virtual simulation, inhabited by computer-generated characters, the result of advanced technology from Fuller's company, a pioneer in virtual reality. Deciding to get some fresh air, Fuller walks to a nearby bar. There, he orders a martini, but quickly steps away to make a call on a public phone, hidden in a discreet corner of the establishment. He leaves a crucial message for Douglas on the answering machine, but his attempt is interrupted by an enigmatic figure whose face remains hidden by the partially open door. Intrigued and perhaps recognizing something familiar in the stranger, Fuller follows him outside the bar. The tension mounts as they enter a dark alley. Fuller is on the verge of confiding his discovery to the mysterious companion when the stranger pulls out a knife and stabs him, leaving him lying lifeless in the shadows of the night. At dawn, Douglas Hall, Fuller's protege and a computer engineer, wakes up disoriented in his apartment. He activates the answering machine as he heads to the bathroom and, with a shock of horror, finds a bloody shirt discarded in the trash. A message from Detective McBain urges him to go immediately to Fuller's office. Arriving there, Douglas comes across the lifeless body of his mentor and is quickly caught in an interrogation conducted by the detective, curious about the company's secret project. Douglas resists revealing any details, claiming confidentiality. Together, they head to Fuller's office, where they are surprised by an unknown woman. She introduces herself as Jane, Fuller's previously unknown daughter. This encounter leaves Douglas astonished, as he had never heard Fuller mention a daughter. As the detective escorts Jane for further questioning, Douglas heads to the 13th floor of the building, where he finds Whitney, another programmer, deeply mourning the death of their boss. It is soon discovered that the company led by Fuller is dedicated to creating a meticulous virtual reality simulation set in 1937 Los Angeles. Whitney shares that Fuller, despite being months away from conducting the first official test, frequently visited the simulation, diving into the unfinished preparations and details. Faced with these somewhat curious events, Douglas, driven by growing suspicion, asks his colleague if he knew that their boss had a daughter named Jane, to which Whitney, with a surprised expression, denies any knowledge. In a moment of reflection, Douglas walks to the window and sees Jane saying goodbye and getting into a taxi. A feeling of suspicion deepens in his chest, and he decides, without notifying anyone, to follow the woman who seems to be hiding more than she appears. Meanwhile, Detective McBain approaches Whitney and begins interrogating him about the purpose of their research. Whitney, somewhat reluctantly, reveals that the virtual environment they created is populated by simulated human figures, unaware that they are merely computer programs. He explains that the choice of 1937 Los Angeles was not random, but an attempt by Fuller to relive the vibrant days of his youth. Meanwhile, following his instincts, Douglas locates Jane at an elegant nearby hotel and gently approaches her in the lobby. He directly asks when she last spoke with Fuller. Somewhat hesitant, she confesses that her father had summoned her from the United States, directly from France, with the explicit purpose of helping him dismantle the new virtual reality system. This revelation catches Douglas by surprise, as until then, the billionaire had never expressed any intention of halting the project. Following these events, Jane has a decisive meeting with her lawyer to discuss the company's next steps. During the conversation, the lawyer drops a bombshell. He reveals that Fuller altered his will in a last-minute move, naming Douglas Hall as the new heir to the company. Meanwhile, Douglas receives this shocking news through McBain and is equally stunned. The detective advises him to stay in town, warning him that he is now considered a suspect in the ongoing investigation. That same night, a previously overlooked detail catches Douglas's attention: a message left by Fuller on his answering machine, which he had previously ignored. In the recording, the billionaire mentions leaving a crucial message for him in the 1937 Los Angeles simulation. Intrigued, Douglas decides to return to the office. There, he plans to enter the virtual world. Whitney tries to dissuade him, but after Douglas insists, she gives in and sets the timer for 2 hours. Douglas positions himself in the simulation chamber and soon finds himself in the body of John Ferguson, a banker. The abrupt transition destabilizes him, leading him to the bathroom to try to adapt to the new reality surrounding him. Douglas mentally replays Whitney's account, in which she mentioned a peculiar habit of Fuller. He often teleported into the consciousness of Grierson, an elderly man who runs an antique shop in Pasadena. With this information in mind, Douglas rushes out, hails a yellow taxi, and heads to the address provided. When he arrives at the antique shop, the first thing he notices is the quaint facade, with windows displaying relics. Inside, he meets the owner, whose appearance is an exact replica of Fuller. The man, with silver hair and a piercing gaze, seems to recognize him from somewhere, but his memory fails to place Douglas in a specific context. This failure of recognition has an explanation. The shop owner is actually a virtual reality creation, a technically perfect character, but lacking authentic human memories. Leaving the shop, Douglas heads to the Wilshire Grand Hotel, following another lead given by Whitney. At the hotel, which exudes an air of elegance from the golden years, he heads to the bar and finds Ashton, the bartender. Douglas asks about any message or letter left by Fuller. Ashton, with a look that hides more than it reveals, denies knowing of any correspondence, although he himself had read the letter in question. Douglas's stay in the virtual world is about to expire. He rushes to the hotel bathroom, where his simulated body suffers an intense convulsion. He wakes up, drenched in cold sweat, in his office, with reality knocking on the door of his consciousness. That night, in a hall illuminated by sparkling chandeliers in a hotel, Douglas meets with Jane. Under the soft music of a piano in the background, he confesses his concern. Fuller tried to contact him before dying, and he fears he has forgotten that crucial conversation, suspecting deep down that it has something to do with the billionaire's death. The memory might have been erased. Jane, with a worried expression, suggests he take this suspicion to the police and step away from the virtual reality machine. The two dance, enveloped in palpable tension, and between dance steps and shared glances, they eventually kiss. Later that same night, Douglas is arrested in his apartment, accused of being the prime suspect in the murder of Hannon Fuller. Detective McBain informs him that his car was caught by security cameras at the crime scene, suggesting the murder was motivated by financial disagreements. As Fuller intended to dismantle the company, Douglas was determined to expand. After Jane pays his bail, Douglas promises to uncover the real culprit. He returns to the office, sets the virtual reality machine's timer to 120 minutes, and lies down in the chamber. In moments, he is transported to 1937 Los Angeles, in the body of John Ferguson. Determined, he decides to begin his investigation by returning to Grierson, the owner of the antique store modeled after Fuller. Grierson and Douglas were comfortable when Grierson decided to share a peculiar discovery. With an intrigued air, he mentioned that he had found something quite strange under his bed days ago. Without much ceremony, he stands up and pulls from a dark corner of the room a sophisticated, time-worn briefcase. Inside lay a high-fashion suit, made of shimmering fabric and with an impeccable fit. Grierson was confused, as he could not recall ever acquiring such a suit, although it fit him like a glove. Douglas, observing carefully, quickly pieced together the puzzle. That suit was a relic from the days when billionaire Fuller transported his consciousness into Grierson's in this intriguing simulation. When Fuller assumed his identity, he frequented the luxurious Grand Wilshire Hotel, dressed precisely in that suit. They decide to go to the hotel to explore more about these mysterious visits. Upon entering the grand lobby, the staff greet Grierson with reverent respect, mistaking him for Fuller, a subtle confirmation of their suspicions. They choose a discreet corner in the ballroom, where Grierson closes his eyes and dives deep into a search for buried memories from when his mind was the stage for Fuller. After moments of intense concentration, Fragments of memory emerge, and he recalls handing a letter to the bartender Ashton with a conspiratorial air. Sensing the tension between the two, Ashton tries to slip away to the locker room, but Douglas cautiously follows. Catching him by surprise, Douglas confronts him, and Ashton, cornered, reveals that he had read the letter and discovered the truth. He was a digital creation. He also shares that he followed the instructions to Tucson, where a glimpse of green codes at the edge of his reality made him realize that he was, in fact, living in a simulation. This revelation shook him to his core, making him seek revenge against Douglas for involving him in this torment. However, before Ashton could act, Whitney intervenes and pulls Douglas out of the simulation. Shocked by this reality, Douglas begins to understand the depth of the emotional experiences of the characters within the simulation. Realizing the ethical implications of manipulating these digital existences, he decides to end the project. But when he seeks comfort at Jane's hotel, he finds Detective McBain waiting for him with disturbing news. Jane is missing, and according to his investigations, Jane Fuller simply does not exist. Desperate for clues, Douglas tracks down the taxi driver who had taken Jane to the hotel days earlier. With some insistence and money, he discovers that Jane had left for a neighboring district in the same taxi. Douglas follows clues until he encounters a surprising revelation. The woman he knew as Jane is actually named Natasha Molinaro and works as a cashier at a local supermarket. Driven by the need to understand the situation, he goes to the establishment. There, upon meeting Natasha, he realizes she does not immediately recognize him, although she mentions feeling a strange sense of familiarity, almost like déjà vu, as if their paths had crossed somewhere distant in her memory. Douglas, who had developed feelings for Jane, faces the painful reality that she may never have existed outside the confines of an illusion. Just as he himself assumes the identity of John Ferguson at certain moments, Jane is nothing more than a spectral visitor inhabiting Molinaro's body. This thought leads him to question the very nature of his existence. Determined to find answers, Douglas gets in his car and follows the same route Ashton had described. After hours of a solitary journey, he arrives at a point where reality seems to collapse, revealing itself as nothing more than a skeleton of digital wireframes. The truth hits Douglas with full force. He is living in a 1999 Los Angeles that is nothing but a virtual construct, a labyrinth of bytes and codes where even his emotions may be part of an advanced script. In the meantime, Jane returns to the simulation, regaining control of Molinaro's body. She calls Douglas, asking him to meet her at Fuller's office, where she promises to unveil all the mysteries. When they finally meet, Jane explains with a disturbing calmness that the universe Douglas believed he lived in is just one among countless virtual worlds in existence. However, it stands out for one singular reason. It is the only virtual world where one of its inhabitants has, in turn, created another virtual world. Jane reveals that despite residing outside the 1990s Los Angeles simulation, she entered the virtual reality after Fuller's tragic death. Her mission was clear: to assume the identity of her own daughter to gain control of the company and ultimately shut down the simulated reality of 1937. However, her plans are abruptly interrupted when Douglas is unexpectedly named the heir to the company. Curiously, the Douglas who exists in the virtual world is a faithful replica of David, her husband in the real world. Despite being a mere projection, Jane finds herself irresistibly drawn to Douglas, developing deep feelings for him. She sorrowfully reveals that it was David, manipulating Douglas's simulated body, who murdered Fuller. She recalls David as a man of integrity in the early years of their marriage. However, over time, he changed. The simulated world became a sinister refuge for him, where he began a series of murders for pure pleasure. In an emotionally charged confession, Jane takes Douglas to bed, and the two share a moment of deep intimacy. In the silence of the night, a jealous David regains control of Douglas's body and tries to strangle Jane in a fit of rage. In a desperate move, she grabs a lamp and strikes him, saving herself at the last second. She rushes to the elevator, descending quickly to the lobby. But as she tries to leave, Jane finds the building's doors locked. David, relentless, reaches the ground floor swiftly and moves toward her with clear malicious intent. However, before he can reach her, Detective McBain bursts in and with a precise shot, ends David's threat. Jane questions the detective's delay, revealing that she had anticipated David's connection. The truth is shocking. She orchestrated her husband's death through Douglas's body, to trap his consciousness in the simulation. This gives Douglas's artificial consciousness the chance to take over David's body in the physical world. In the thrilling final scene, Douglas awakens in 2024 in David's room, disconnecting himself from the virtual reality. As he steps out, he meets the real Jane, who guides him outside. There, he is greeted by a surprising sight: a futuristic Los Angeles, under the watchful gaze of Hanson Fuller, Jane's real father, and so the movie ends.